it's great to have you here again today, everybody, and thanks for dialing in. I know it's probably been the third or fourth installation of a Zoom day like it has been for me. But really, we just wanted to set this up for you this afternoon and just to talk about some of the things that are coming across your radar. I'm getting a lot of emails from people who are concerned with what's going on, who'd love to know more about conscious capitalism, what we do, who want to know more about how we can engage and how we can work together and all sorts of things. So I'm really glad that we've got some board members. Gavin Watson is our chairman, and Alrin is on the board as well. And just to open it up, I have no agenda. This is about you. It's about what's on your mind. And we want you to know that this is a community where you are safe expressing some ideas about how to make it a better world. So Gavin, did you want to steer it at all, or how do you feel?
Sure. Yeah, Glenn's had a busy day with lots of Zoom things, so he's going to take a back seat today. But, like as Glenn was saying, I mean, we could talk about anything. I've got to guess what kinds of things will come up, but I don't want to just jump in and lead it. If somebody else wants to start in with what's on their mind and what's going on, that, we could do that.
Well, I sort of would like to talk about the feedback that I am getting from a lot of businesses who, I guess in a somewhat pained response to what's going on with all of the protests and all of the new awareness, or for some, their initial awareness of companies who are suddenly looking to do business with Black-owned businesses and wanting to resource. I think in some ways, some of it, I mean, I know the players that are emailing me with these questions, and some of them, I think, genuinely want to develop relationships. Others, I think, are wanting to make themselves feel better.
Definitely the feel better things, could be a part of it. I guess if I was a business, the first thing that I would be doing is looking inside of what's going on in our company and what are we doing. And, it's sort of like one of the guys echoed the same sort of thing that I said on the Conscious Capitalism International thing that we were just in. And that is that, you can look at your own policies and your own things. What are you doing? Because when I think back on it, we had policies that we set up with the intention of being an efficient manufacturing organization. We were doing food processing. So, food safety and security and that kind of thing was important. So, we set up policies about, arriving on time, and, if you, miss work or whatever, 3 strikes and you're out, or, things like that. We had policies about if you had a felony and that kind of stuff, and who could, and what kind of crime it was, and all this kind of thing that we went into, which was, ostensibly to prevent the wrong kind of people from entering a food manufacturing plant that might have bad intentions and, might adulterate food and injure a bunch of people. So, that's where our heads were coming from. But I think unintentionally, what we did was we made it really difficult for a lot of minority people to, work for us. People who had extra issues, if you don't have a car. You're relying on public transportation if there's a problem with that. I mean, there's so many, if you're a single parent, there's so many things that happen to you in your life that you can't control, and all of a sudden you're late for work or you miss work or something, happens. And it's because you're in a disadvantaged population that kind of thing happens to you. There was a great guy, I still think about him. He was a great employee. He was a lot of fun. He loved tools. He loved mechanical stuff. He was working one of the production lines, and he reorganized the whole tool bin. He was a great guy to have around. And then he got arrested and charged and convicted for a crime, and we let him go. you know, and I felt terrible about it at the time, but now not only do I feel terrible about it, but I know that it was the wrong thing to do. You know, because it wasn't a real serious crime or anything. It wasn't a big deal, but it was in our policy. So, you know, I get it, like going out and you know, doing business with a Black-owned business or something like that. Those are great ideas and things that definitely businesses should be doing. But I think, you know, the first thing, the easiest thing to do in a way is to put on a different lens of glasses and look at your policies and go, what things do we have in there that we unwittingly, you know, and unintentionally set up barriers to people to you know, and if people come in into our company and look around and they don't see any managers who are, you know, who are minorities, what are they going to think about their chances of advancement? You know, that kind of thing. So we need to be thinking about those kind of internal things and see what we can do.
It is just what I would expect from you, Gavin.
Thanks. You know, that's part of being a conscious company. You setting up a conscious culture and conscious leadership, and consciously go through your policies and see if you unwittingly are setting stuff up, you know, creating hurdles for some groups that just are going to have a hard time with them. You know, we can go and talk about implicit bias and a bunch of other things. So one of the thoughts that came to me the other day was I was mentioning this to Glenn, that the performance, the symphony performance industry, and you know, a few years ago, maybe almost a decade now, basically instituted a practice of doing blind auditions. So instead of people coming out, sitting on a stage and playing, you know, the viola or whatever, for, you know, a couple of people were listening to them, and you know, whether they were going to get to join the orchestra or not, instead the person would play from behind the curtain. And, you know, women were even told, take off your high heels, you know, because just the sound of the high heels clicking across the stage will clue people in. So people had no idea who it was who was performing, you know, behind the curtain. And so all they could do was judge them on their music that they played. Mm-hmm. So they did that, and greater minority, you know, greater numbers of minority and women and things started getting into, you know, these orchestras. Then a few years later, maybe 5, 6 years later, somebody decided to replicate this study and just check and see if it, you know, if it was really true. And what they ended up finding out was, when they did it with the curtain, without the curtain, what they ended up finding out was that the curtain was now actually disadvantaging the women and minorities, because people were by now, most people were self-correcting for what they understood was their own implicit bias and the unfairness of the system, and they were trying to correct for it. And so they would, you know, without the curtain, they would pick the woman, they would pick the minority person, you know, at, you know, more times. And then with the curtain, now they were doing that fewer because they were just listening to the music. So it's interesting how culturally, I think we've sort of made a shift between, you know, more discriminating to, you know, more of us now are actually kind of trying to, you know, fix the system, fix what was wrong, and rebalance the scales so that it's more equal and more fair, and make up for, you know, past issues. Yeah. Hey, James.
Hey, my firm develops health benefit plans for medium-sized companies, and we've had a couple of conversations about how do we create benefit options that help meet people's needs that don't necessarily have a car, or don't necessarily, or they have maybe some past medical needs that have been unaddressed in the past. So we started thinking about, in the past you say, if you have high blood pressure or your body mass index is high, then we'll waive copays if you take a class, work on that issue, and we'll reduce your deductible if you're actively working on it. So we started thinking about adding a kind of a socioeconomic component to that, so that if your income level is lower, you get lower deductibles and lower copays automatically, or that you get extra points for that to reduce the cost of healthcare if you're working on it. Or say if you don't have a car and you can't get to a doctor's appointment, let's reimburse Uber and Lyft rides to provide the kind of social supports that would help people get the healthcare supports they need. And so we're thinking through those things, and any suggestions you all have about that might be helpful. Of course, the problem is we can recommend it, but the employers who sponsor these plans are the ones who have to adopt these into their programs. But we've begun to think about how do we create supports that address that without necessarily saying it's based on race. No, that's not going to work. We have to base it on some other needs base that might correlate with that to help our whole working population reach the kind of goals that are easier if you have more resources to reach than if you don't. So those are things that we've been thinking about.
Yeah, that's great. So one of the thoughts that came to me the other day was I was mentioning this to Glenn, that the performance, the symphony performance industry, and you know, a few years ago, maybe almost a decade now, basically instituted a practice of doing blind auditions. So instead of people coming out, sitting on a stage and playing, you know, the viola or whatever, for, you know, a couple of people were listening to them, and you know, whether they were going to get to join the orchestra or not, instead the person would play from behind the curtain. And, you know, women were even told, take off your high heels, you know, because just the sound of the high heels clicking across the stage will clue people in. So people had no idea who it was who was performing, you know, behind the curtain. And so all they could do was judge them on their music that they played. Mm-hmm. So they did that, and in greater minority, you know, greater numbers of minority and women and things started getting into, you know, these orchestras. Then a few years later, maybe 5, 6 years later, somebody decided to replicate this study and just check and see if it, you know, if it was really true. And what they ended up finding out was, when they did it with the curtain, without the curtain, what they ended up finding out was that the curtain was now actually disadvantaging the women and minorities, because people were by now, most people were self-correcting for what they understood was their own implicit bias and the unfairness of the system, and they were trying to correct for it. And so they would, you know, without the curtain, they would pick the woman, they would pick the minority person, you know, at, you know, more times. And then with the curtain, now they were doing that fewer because they were just listening to the music. So it's interesting how culturally, I think we've sort of made a shift between, you know, more discriminating to, you know, more of us now are actually kind of trying to, you know, fix the system, fix what was wrong, and rebalance the scales so that it's more equal and more fair, and make up for, you know, past issues. Yeah. Hey, James.
Hey, my firm develops health benefit plans for medium-sized companies, and we've had a couple of conversations about how do we create benefit options that help meet people's needs that don't necessarily have a car, or don't necessarily they have maybe some past medical needs that have been unaddressed in the past. So we started thinking about, in the past, you say, if you have high blood pressure or your body mass index is high, then we'll waive copays if you take a class, work on that issue, and we'll reduce your deductible if you're actively working on it. So we started thinking about adding a kind of a socioeconomic component to that, so that if your income level is lower, you get lower deductibles and lower copays automatically, or that you get extra points for that to reduce the cost of healthcare if you're working on it. Or say if you don't have a car and you can't get to a doctor's appointment, let's reimburse Uber and Lyft rides to provide the kind of social supports that would help people get the healthcare supports they need. And so we're thinking through those things, and any suggestions you all have about that might be helpful. Of course, the problem is we can recommend it, but the employers who sponsor these plans are the ones who have to adopt these into their programs. But we've begun to think about how do we create supports that address that without necessarily saying it's based on race. No, that's not going to work. We have to base it on some other needs base that might correlate with that to help our whole working population reach the kind of goals that are easier if you have more resources to reach than if you don't. So those are things that we've been thinking about.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, yeah, because there's that whole medical health divide between people who have more time affluence, who can, you know, spend more time jogging or exercising or that, and that kind of thing, and maybe have healthier food choices because they've got a bigger food budget than people who just, you know, don't have the time, can't exercise, and have to eat like what's least expensive.
I have that issue in spades. I own a home healthcare agency in New Haven. So all of my employees are by definition working poor. This field just does not pay a lot. And they are almost exclusively minority women. We have got a couple white people and a couple male, but the vast majority of my employees are either Black and or Hispanic women. That comprises 90% of my workforce. And that's just the nature of that industry, or this industry. The things that I've been trying to focus on, similar to some of the things that James and Gavin have said, is helping my employees find services so they can work. I've got employees that can't work because they don't have childcare. So that hurts them because they can't work. It hurts me because I've got shifts that go unfilled. I mean, I've called around trying to find affordable childcare solutions for my employees, and I have even contemplated helping subsidize that. I haven't found the appropriate, the appropriate venue, the appropriate solution, but I have had some conversations with folks that, you know, look, if you need me to throw in a couple of bucks so you can go to work, I'm willing and able to do that. We help our employees provide transportation. They don't all have reliable transportation. I give my employees rides to work if I need to. I've done it more than once. But you know, it's obviously a Band-Aid solution. So I'm trying to find broader solutions to help my employees. It's going to help them, and it's going to help me. And it's going to help my clients who matter as well. So that's the kind of thing that I am trying to look for and trying to work towards.
Thanks, Matthew, for sharing that. And one of the things, you know, if we can all be focused on reducing the barriers and creating opportunities, one of the simplest ways to do that sort of system-wide is to, like Gavin was saying, just have open hiring principles. Yep. where you remove any opportunity to filter out depending on your bias. And as we know, biases aren't easy to identify, so it's hard to remove them. And if I may be so bold as to just make an observation about the people on this call, which is similar to what I just made on the previous call, we had 38 people from around the world, but there was, I don't think, any non-white speakers on the call, and that to me is a red flag. And the fact that we are having this conversation almost exclusively in our our silo, and so Gavin and I are actively recruiting voices from outside to so we can begin to address and begin to see the filters that we don't. So if anyone on this call has any recommendations of motivated people that would be good candidates, we'd love to hear about it.
Hi, I'm Carrie. I work for Jennifer Gorin. I know she was one of our speakers from Impact Growth Partners. So we help companies achieve B Corp certification. And my main focus is helping, build the Connecticut community. We are now up to 8 companies within Connecticut who are B Corp certified, but we actually have had those similar conversations trying to, and I have lists of companies, Black owned companies, not only in Connecticut, but outside of Connecticut, and really trying to get, I think, that community, entwined within the B Corp community and conscious capitalism, so to speak. And yeah, I'd definitely be interested in having that conversation because it's within Connecticut and beyond, really. And because there are so many strong leaders within that community that we'd like to touch base with and help.
Actually, Glenn, I have over time shared a few of those people in Connecticut that would be certainly not B Corp candidates, but very definitely perhaps under the current leadership of Conscious Capitalism, could be very interested. And I know their businesses really well because they've been clients, now friends, for years.
I just wanted to make a suggestion to Matthew, who just spoke about the daycare issue. Are you familiar with an organization called All Our Kin? Matthew?
No, I am not.
You might want to look them up. They're right in New Haven, and they are a great resource. They provide resources for providers. They train people to be providers. They've been very involved in the community. And if they don't lead you to someone, you might be able to help someone start a business, you know, maybe a minority-owned business or not, but I'm just saying, I think they would be great people to start talking to.
I agree.
Opportunity. You agree, Lindy? Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Sure. No,
And
thank
I
you for
have
that.
other people, but they're the first ones that came to mind. I don't know if you have other suggestions, Lindy.
And I don't know what your geographic range is, but the good news about All Our Kin is that they have providers all over the state.
Yeah, and they've been at it for a while. They're very good people. So
Okay.
it's a resource that maybe not enough people know about.
I mean, my clientele covers most of Southern Connecticut, but my employee base is largely located in New Haven. Not exclusively, but
And
largely.
it's perfect because they probably want to keep their kids local. Yeah.
Yeah. The contact names are Jana Wagner
Yeah.
would be the right person to call.
Jenna Wagner?
Janna Wagner. And they're nationally recognized, and they started off just training daycare providers, but now they actually have a loan fund so that the women that they train can make upgrades to their homes if they need it for licensing and actually put them into business.
Great, thank you. Thank you both.
And the other name is Jessica Sager. They're the two co-founders.
I just posted something along those same lines. There's a group that's national group. I know they've got a presence in New York City and one in Boston area. I don't think they've got anything in Connecticut, but you should check out their website. It's pretty cool. It's ICA Group, and they put an email address for one of the women who works there. And they work with companies that do at-home, healthcare and also childcare companies. So might be something there too that they could help you out with. Yeah. Hey, Shel.
Hi, Gavin. Good to be here again.
Yeah.
If I can have permission to kind of throw a spear in a very different direction.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fascinated and loving all the resources that people are sharing, but for me as a solopreneur, they haven't really been relevant. But one of the things that I think we might explore is, are we creating a moment? I was starting to hear this back in March and April with some of my climate activist friends, and particularly if anybody knows Gil Friend on the West Coast, he has been leading some salons exploring the opportunities for climate activists in a society that has now shown that actually, yes, we can do these impossible pivots. And I feel like we're at the cusp of another one regarding racism. I live in the Northampton Amherst area, an hour north of you folks. And one of the things that I noticed is that all of a sudden in the last 2 weeks, there are people out on the streets, lots and lots of people who probably are standing too close to each other. The last demonstration that my wife and I went to, we were deliberately a block away from the main demonstration, holding our signs and not feeling like we were risking getting contaminated in our 60s.
Right.
But I saw the picture in the paper the next day. There were 4,000 people around the corner in front of the police station. That's kind of amazing, and a fairly significant number of people of color compared to the very limited number that live locally in our area. And so I think the conversations that people are beginning to have nationally, the way support for the open, increasingly open racism coming out of the White House has been plummeting. The way that Minneapolis took steps to really completely reinvent their police department.
Yeah.
I feel like, are there ways that we can be agents of change in helping this? And at the same time, the demand defund the police that so many of my progressive friends have adopted, I don't think is the right demand. Because I hear people trying to weasel on it and saying, well, we're not talking about total defunding. Well, then use a different term. You know, because defund means to take away the money from. And police all too often serves a reactionary role, but it certainly doesn't have to. And I have had the experience a few times of needing and receiving support from police for progressive political action. At one point, my wife got a harassing phone call after her name was posted on some right-wing nutjob website. And we called the chief of police, and he was very helpful. So I know I'm kind of all over the map with this, but those are just some things that I thought maybe we could explore a little.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah, I think, yeah, there's just the words defunding police there's two sides to it, right? It's a great call to arms for the group that you know is with you, but it's super emotionally charged for anybody who's like not for that. So it's going to be great for like motivating your crowd, but it's going to really pile up the opposition in front of you really fast. So yeah, it's a kind of unfortunate choice of words, but it's sort of like social, in a way, it's like social distancing when we really mean physical distancing. We should have chosen the right words to start with. It would have been much better.
Yeah, I always say physical distancing, and sometimes I actually say social intimacy with physical distancing.
There you go. That's perfect. Yeah. So yeah, I think obviously, this is definitely we have to strike while the iron's hot, both from a climate change point of view and, from a racism, social equity, point of view. This is the moment. So we can change a lot of things really quick. The things we have changed that people didn't want to change, but we just did from a climate point of view, that's been great. I'm not sure, I still haven't taken the time to actually look up numbers or anything, but I'm sure our CO2 output and things much less than it was before December, but I don't know by what percent. And I don't know if we're anywhere near close to like what we really need to be at to pull this out. Yeah, so we got to dig deeper, right? Is that what you're saying, Shel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also to seize this opportunity that's been handed to us.
Yeah, exactly. And even just the awareness that we can do a lot better. Even in my household, I was the one who was going around turning off all the lights all the time. And now now the rooms where all the lights were on all the time, they're not. Mm-hmm. So people are like, I'm like, and I didn't even have to nag anybody about it. They just kind of started doing it. I'm like, okay, good. Starting to settle in now.
There is that strong racial/social justice, again, thinking about employees, and that's obviously my kind of where I'm coming from is, how do I know how, well, I don't know how. I have ideas about how I can be a better employer. I'm more interested in what can we as an employer community do to support our employees. And one of the things that comes up is doing background checks. And again, we're placing people in people's homes. So by law, we have to do background check. And not only that, it's a moral obligation. My clients are, as a general rule, a fairly defenseless population. I have a legal and ethical responsibility to protect them. That said, when you do background checks on people, you find a lot of people who've had their driver's license suspended at one point in the past. Why? Because they didn't have the money to pay the damn fines.
Right.
So these kinds of issues just pop up over and over again. People who have been arrested for, 6th-degree petty larceny, whatever the hell that is, which is probably shoplifting.
Yeah.
Or listen, I've had a number of employees, and it's not a condition of employment. I can employ them if they've had their license suspended, but I have to be careful about can I have them drive my clients? And there's time periods and severities and such. But since we know that traffic fines and such fall disproportionately on the community that my caregivers come from, you know, and so I've tried to be judicious with how I enforce and how I monitor those kinds of policies. But balance of that, like I need to make sure I protect my clients first and foremost. And there's no easy way to do this, but as you know, I'm just thinking more about we as an employer community, those of us who are employers, the more we can do to help our employees, the better it is for our employees, and ultimately the better it is for our businesses, and the better it is for our society.
Yeah. One thing that might be relevant to both Gavin and Matthew, are either of you familiar with Grayston Bakery in Yonkers?
Yep.
No, I am not.
Okay. They bake the brownies for Ben & Jerry's and for some fancy New York hotels. And they have the most amazing hiring policy of any company I have ever come across.
Can you tell me the name of it again, please?
Grayston Bakery. I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, okay, good, thank you.
Actually, I've already put, Shell, I already put the link to the YouTube video that Grayston did around open hiring. So I'm glad you're bringing it up.
Right, then I won't bother. It's Greyston. It was founded by Bernie Glassman. And basically, the way you get a job there is you go there and you say, I want to work for you. And they put you at the next position on the list. And then when a job opens up, they go to the top person on the list. And whether that person is an ex-addict, an ex-felon, you know, former mental health patient, whatever they are, if they're willing to get the training and do the work, they get offered a job. And they pretty much, I think nearly all of their managers come from low-level employees who started there and worked up. It's really quite remarkable, and they've done extremely well. And they are like, Gavin, I don't know what it is that company you were talking about was doing, but they're a food business. So they would have had all the issues that you would have had.
They're a little bit more, they're a more aware food business than we were.
But I mean, an arrest for something irrelevant should not necessarily be a barrier to hiring. And a lot of companies should be looking at, why do we have this? What is it accomplishing? And it's one thing if you're hiring someone to drive an armored car with $600,000 in it, you know, but
it's kind of funny that they're baking brownies.
Yes.
It's kind of famous.
Yeah.
Their slogan is, we don't hire people to bake brownies, we bake brownies to hire people.
That's great.
And it may be that I've been hanging out with Glenn too much, but everything starts to look like a marketing thing to me now. So, there's a difference between Whole Foods and a regular grocery store, right? So, maybe there's a differentiation thing you could do, Matthew, where you differentiate, how you run your business and what you do for your people and who you don't screen out and things like that, because, not everybody's going to get it. A lot of people are just going to buy the cheapest, whatever they can get. But I would think that if I was, somebody who needed medical assistance for a large time of the day, that I would want people coming into my house to take care of me. My factors for choosing them would be more than just that they just had a clean slate or that they were the cheapest. I would think that I would be, wanting more than that. And if I could, if somebody could be, if I could in a way be helping a disadvantaged person at the same time or whatever, then, that just sounds good to me. Maybe there's other people, maybe there's a way to work that. And the type of company that you're running, the fact that you give people, rides, that you help them out financially once in a while when they need a few bucks to get through, some wicket in their lives that jamming them up, so maybe there's a way to do that differently.
I just wanted to share real quick, just a sort of a quick what to do guide. And Gavin and I have sort of shared this around through the week. and I found it on social. I think the credits are in the bottom, but it really just applies to everybody. In there, simple things you can do just to broaden your education, whether it's watch a movie or something. They're some of these are pretty simple ideas to expand your education, because it's great to hear from Matthew and his struggles around his business model that sort of provide barricades to open hiring, which is what Graceland Bakery is famous for. So everyone has got different constraints here, but what I like about this is that it's a guide that most people can somewhat execute. So I dropped it in the chat, but I just wanted to break in now and make sure, because a lot of people aren't working on the chat room, of simple things to do.
I also think, Gavin, to follow up on your point to Matthew, as part of a differentiation, I think there are a lot of people who look to hire home health aides, hoping that they're going to be like an extra family member.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the kind of culture that should be promoted.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, because when you think about that, like, this is you're it's almost like you're bringing in a nephew or a niece, or a future nephew or a niece or something into your home, and obviously if they have kids, you want them to be successful and taking care of them, because you're going to end up caring about this person.
Now I'm going to tell you a strategy that I did years ago. I was a founder of an organization called Cornerstone, which was a mental health halfway house and wraparound kind of services, and a founder of fellowship place. And what we did was develop a job bank, and how we were able to get employers to buy in, to your point about 3 strikes and you're out, is we said, and it could be the most menial job. I mean, there were some pretty awful jobs that we were able to get, which was fine because that's what these folks needed at first. But we said, we're going to have a staff person train with this person who's going to be your employee. Because in that way, if that staff person never has to miss a day, you won't be without an employee, because that staff member will be there doing that job. And it really, the longer the person was getting better, the more reliable they became, and it was unnecessary, and the staff member could not be on call for that.
Move on. The staff member could move on to coach somebody else.
Right.
I'm laughing because I have a contract with a facility here, and I had a caregiver call out, and I put on scrubs and did a shift in a nursing home, just to be able to put my money where my mouth was.
Yeah. That's great, man.
But no, that is not what I want the SOP to be.
No, right. But
you do it sometimes when you need to.
Yeah. And it sounds to me like your heart's all in the right place and everything, and there's got to be a way to to tell the world where you're coming from and what you're doing, and and then so that people will go ahead and spend a little bit extra money and choose you over somebody else, and allow you to tweak who you're bringing in, and allow them to skip some extra some hurdles. I don't know, if you could charge more, then maybe if you have 12 people, you have 1 extra person. So when that one person has a family emergency, it's not a crisis. The spare person jumps in and covers for them or something. That kind of thing. In
an industry like mine, price is generally not a factor. When you think about the guild, do you want the absolute cheapest person taking care of your mom when you're not home?
Right. No, exactly.
There is a certain amount of that. I'm just bringing from 2 perspectives. One is obviously my business, but also just that societal issue of, we are, and it kind of got lost a little bit and kicked off the front page because of the racial issues or the post kind of post protest things, but issues of paid leave, paid sick leave. No one wants a sick person, you know, whether it's in a nursing home or in a home health care or in their restaurant or any place else for that matter. And so these kinds of issues are coming to the social justice, economic justice, whatever you want to call it, and have been brought to the forefront.
Yeah. Hey everybody, I'd like to introduce myself. This is Nadine, and I'm really so interested in this conversation. Happenstantially, my mom, I'm actually in the process right now of vetting and evaluating healthcare providers so that my mom could continue to age at home. She's 93 and has lived independently up until now. So
I may know someone who can help you with that.
that would be right. So I mean, this is a very apropos conversation as it intersects with some of my immediate responsibilities that came about as a result of my mom getting picked up by the police at 8 o'clock at night, dehydrated, disoriented, and not knowing where she was. And you know, upon release, we made it our business to speak to a social worker so that we could kind of create a program for her to be able to continue to age at home, but in a safe manner. And so that's kind of a bit of a scramble to find people who are caring, qualified, who, you know, per the comments before, this is your loved one. This is not where you're shopping for the cheapest price per se, although you may want to, if you have Medicaid benefit opportunities, you certainly may want to kind of keep the search within those organizations that do accept Medicaid. So it's been quite an education for me into the elder care, healthcare, I guess you could say, world, for lack of a better word. So thank you for everybody's contributions and ideas. And, you know, I echo that. It's not the cheapest price. It's where are we getting the best value and where's the best fit for my mom's needs.
Thanks, Nadine, and welcome to the group. But there's just one other kind of idea that we've been thinking about within the chapter around sort of racial equity and people sort of incarcerated communities. And as we know, that the racial distortion is very high in our jail system. And one of the main reasons or the contributors for that is the number of sort of low-level offences that these people end up in jail with. And a lot of them, of course, are related to drugs. So we've got an interesting conversation coming up, not next week, the week after, on June the 25th. We've been collaborating with the chapter in New York and an agency called BPCM, who have this conscious cannabis conversation around the new business model in the cannabis industry, and people that are representing various aspects of the business community will be on that call. So I think that will be an interesting sort of divergence from what we're talking about today, but it sort of fits well into the equity piece as well.
Oh, that sounds very interesting. Okay, I'm marking my calendar.
Glenn, you may want to get some of the folks on board that are working on the Emerge project from SVP as well. And maybe Scott Wilderman from Strive and Career Resources.
Thank you.
And the other interesting person, because there are a few that are great on this topic. One is Bill Dyson, former state senator. He and I have been on the circuit talking about this for many, many, many years. There is so much work being done in this arena. you know, it's really a question Bill Dyson and I used to talk about. It was sort of like Buck and Bubbles. His kid gets arrested, my kid gets arrested. My kid is lawyered up, and if he's a good boy for a year, it never happened. His kid goes to jail.
Exactly. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, you guys probably heard the example of the pothole and coming to work example. People heard that. So there's I'm struggling to remember where I heard this, but I've heard it a couple of different times now. But so there's a woman who's vice president of something or other in some company, and she's driving to work in her Mercedes. She hits a pothole. She's her rims bent and she can't come to work. She calls AAA. They tow her car because it's a Mercedes. She gets a loaner. They fix it, and there's no charge because she has insurance. And she gets to work late, and everybody's like consoling her for almost been a traumatic experience, blah blah stuff like that, right? So, and then, the same company, you can have, a woman who works on the production floor and, she's got her old clunker car that, she got for $200. She hits the same pothole on the way in the next day. And, her boss shoots her out for being late and says, one more time and I got to write you up. And she's not sure where she's going to get the money to pay for the thing because she doesn't have, that kind of insurance. And she got to get a ride for a friend to pick her up at the tow truck place to get her to work, and then how's she going to pick up her kids, and nobody consoles her about anything. So that's just a sort of that disparity that happens the way that people get treated just because of your class. It's it's like a class or caste system or racial system, whatever it is, but there's a huge divide in the way people get treated.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a definite cost to being poor. And that's one example. Another example is if you have to go to a payday loan person and you're spending 30% of your very skinny paycheck to get that money ahead when you need it. And there's thousands of other examples. This is something that we as a whole society need to really be looking at. And
I will cash checks for my employees because some of them have bank accounts, others do not. I got a phone call the other day from the Western Union office. My employee was in front of him, and he could not read my really lousy handwriting. This is a woman who worked one shift or 1.5 shifts for me. She earned $100. I wrote her a check for $100. I don't know how much she was going to pay to have this. Probably something between $3 to $5, maybe more, to have this check cashed. It's 3 to 5% of whatever the check was, and it killed me because she didn't know I would have cashed it for her, for no charge, obviously. I am going to move my bank. I use a kind of an out-of-state bank for odd reasons. I am going to move my bank to one of the local New Haven banks so that my employees will be able to cash their paychecks. Because the fact that she had to pay, I don't know, $3, $5, $7, whatever it was, to Western Union to cash a $100 paycheck is just killing me. Just killing me.
There's an organization that Glenn and I were talking to a few weeks ago called Capital Wealth Management. They're located in Rhode Island. They don't do work in Connecticut currently, but they do work in a few other states. I think Texas and California. They're working on Massachusetts, but their whole idea is to put those payday lenders out of business. Mm-hmm. So just that they make small loans to people and help them out and help them set up their bank accounts and coach them on financial things and that kind of stuff. So they're pretty cool organization.
Back to the health benefit issue. If we design a plan that has a $20 copay if you go to a federally qualified health clinic, which provides great coverage and continuity of care for people, particularly people who don't have a car in the city, that plan compared to the plan that's got a $4,000 deductible is perceived by the actuaries as a lot more expensive. So when you present both programs to an employees, lower income employees typically choose the lowest cost plan for them that might have this $4,000 deductible. Right. And so it just works completely against their interest, because then there's no coverage until you hit $4,000. So people put off care until it's super expensive. And then it's bad for the employer. So trying to find back to this idea of if we got to design a plan that's linked somehow to your income so that people with lower incomes who can't afford the high deductible, and frankly, they've got nothing to put into a health savings account anyway. We just need to redesign the entire process of health insurance so that it's not discriminating against folks with low means. And we're working, trying to struggle through that, but it's kind of like the issue of not hiring people who've got a criminal record. We handle other people's money. So the people who audit us insist that we have these policies and procedures in place. And we take those out at the risk of having a worse score on our internal procedures, which then raises the cost of us getting fidelity bonds and fiduciary response, So it's so systematic throughout the whole system. We've got to find a way to break through.
Yeah. Sounds like we could have a whole meeting just on that.
It also sounds like it may even need legislative help.
Yeah.
And that may be the kind of thing that the business community can do. I mean, the business community is a very strong advocate for its own, for itself. But, again, there's a lot of us in the business community who we don't advocate for our employees. And we can. There may be things that we can do and should do that help our employees. We're helping ourselves. We're helping our community. But we're helping our people. And so I got physically ill when I got that phone call because I know how hard this woman worked for her money, and the fact she was giving it to Western Union because she didn't have a bank account. There are things that we can do. I mean, to me, that's conscientious capitalism. It was nice to meet you all. I need to run to a very stimulating conversation on digital marketing. So just going from one extreme to the other, but thank you for those suggestions. I'll definitely follow up with them.
Thanks, Matthew.
I look forward to talking to everyone in the future. Thank you much.
All right, great. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Okay, thanks, Matthew.
Just while Matthew's leaving, I just want to kind of flag next week what we've got coming up is that there are two women based in Hartford, and they're going to be talking to us about their built-in biases and how to help break them with by using some sort of creative workshop techniques that they've developed together over the years as comedians and stand-up. So I think it'll be a good little break from the rhythm of conversation that we've been having, and that will sort of lean into humor and how humor can help break some of these unconscious biases that we all have. So I think that might, and since you've all signed up, you will be getting an email about that coming up. So look forward to that. Anything else that's going on? What's anything else on your mind?
No, I think the idea of humor, though, could be very helpful, because I think humor always tends to reflect at least kind of what's current, and this is a very current topic, and that would be I wouldn't know about its long-term impact, certainly as a vehicle to raise the issue and allow people to maybe relax around it with some laughter and humor. It sounds sounds like it could be a very healing approach to having, at least starting the conversation, even though for sure it's going to go much deeper than humor. So yeah, I like that a lot. Just my personal 2 cents.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, exactly. Helps to release the tension about a thing, right?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, why don't we wrap it up today? It's been a long Zoomy day, and thank you so much for just coming and talking. We're going to do these open houses on a semi-regular basis, just because it's good to come into a room and not have an agenda. And often some of the most important issues come up in that sort of vacuum. So, well done.
I think it was welcomed because everybody is in such distress, no matter what they've done in the past or what they will continue to do or hope to do better. I think everybody's suffering.
Yeah, and it's like the Kennedys wrote in his book that, everyone has periods of grief in their life. It's what you choose to do with it.
Mhm.
And I certainly don't want to waste this opportunity to come out as a better civilization. And that's the sense of urgency that grips me and Gavin right now, and that we want to be a place where this community can come together and make some big changes. It's urgent.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Have a good
All
night.
right, I'll leave you on that note. See you next week.
Have a
Bye.
great
Wow.
weekend. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
your help.
Good to see you all.
Likewise.
Bye-bye. Stay healthy and safe.